Dude, this fucking hit detection is terrible.
I gotta reload.
Jesus Christ, how does this not hit? Like, that's fucking garbage.
Alright guys, it's me, Brian by the Creek. Welcome back to another video on the channel, and if you couldn't tell, this is gameplay of Battlefield 2042. The actual launch of Battlefield 2042, not the beta. Which, I have a lot of opinions on this game, kind of spicy. I like the game. I'm going to go ahead and get that out of the way. Just as a contradiction to the first clip I started off with. I do really, really like Battlefield 2042. I like it a lot, and I'll get into that. I also have an Apex video prepared here with Ash gameplay. Nothing too exotic, I would say, just some Ash gameplay. I've been really enjoying Ash, although I have to admit the Rampage and Triple Take has been pissing me off this season. Regardless, let's talk about Battlefield. So, Battlefield 2042 is probably the most anticipated game of 2021, I would argue, if not one of the most anticipated games. I would say Elden Ring, but Elden Ring is 2022, I think February, and that's also highly anticipated. However, a lot of people, upon release of Battlefield 2042, this game is torn right now. It's between two opinions. I mean, there's more than two opinions, but like two general opinions of the game. A common one is that it's too buggy, it's not prepared, it's lacking, I hate specialists. There's all kinds of like excuses and reasons and whatnot for people to dislike this game, but there's also a lot of reasons to like the game. That's not to say that they're wrong, but me personally, I think this game is really good, and I think it has a lot of potential. That's what I understand from this game right now as I've played it. I've already played quite a bit. I think I'm level 40-something right now, and that doesn't include my level 27 or like 30 account on Xbox that I got during the early access. It sounds weird to just skip over the bugs, so I'm going to go ahead and address those. There are some bugs in Battlefield 2042, and those should not be ignored. It is fairly certain that there are some bugs that are quite annoying. There's a bug where you can't spawn in unless you change a character, and it essentially gives you nothing but a bare bones M5A3, I think. I think it's an M5A3. You can't put any attachments on it. You don't have a secondary gadget, meaning like the recoilless M5 or the Stinger or the mines or anything like that. Like, you don't have that gadget at your disposal. And it resets all your cosmetics. And if you use something like an EBA Wildcat and you unlock like the 40mm or 57mm cannon or like the rocket volley pods or anything like that, the repairing, the thermal smoke, the smoke launcher, it all gets reset to the factory equipment. So you have to re-equip those the next match in order to actually keep your 40mm cannon, which is something I really like, in the game. And it applies to every vehicle, essentially. The same can be said for weapons, I believe. Now, I've never had the weapon experience where my weapons attachments have been reset, but I have played with people that claim that their weapons have been reset. Another issue is that you can't revive teammates sometimes through walls. Well, not through walls, but when they're too close to a wall when they die, or if they're too close to a surface when they die, you can't revive them. Whether you're reviving a Blueberry as a Maria Falk or as an Angel, or if you're just trying to revive a squad mate, sometimes you can't. Which, kind of annoying. But in general, most of the bugs in the game are pretty small. And some people would argue that, well, how are they small? They're annoying. They're not that small. Well, let's take a look at, I think it was 2011. I think it was 2011 was Battlefield 3. Battlefield 3 and forward had almost guaranteed buggy as fuck launches, with the exception of Battlefield 1. Battlefield 1 was buggy, but it was probably the best Battlefield launch since, I believe, Battlefield Bad Company 2. And I'm not going to use the, well, it's just Battlefield excuse, but when I feel like people kind of oversell the bugs in this game, and they're constantly like comparing Battlefield 2042 to Battlefield 4 and Battlefield 3 and all these other amazing games. Well, I love Battlefield 4, and I didn't play that much of Battlefield 3. I was just a little too young. I did play it, but not that much. Battlefield 4 always had a better place in my heart. Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5, people compare it to. There was bigger and worse bugs, especially in Battlefield 4. If I remember correctly at launch, Battlefield 4 was goddamn near unplayable. at launch. And you also got to look at, if you don't know yet, we are getting a patch as of Thanksgiving addressing balancing issues and server-sided issues. They've already made some server-sided pushes to increase tick rate and server improvements to make the servers better. Ever since they've pushed those things through the server, which, keep in mind, was within a week or two of the game coming out, I haven't had any frame drops. I haven't had any game crashes. I have hardly had any error codes. I've had a couple of error codes, but not a lot, which is substantially better than the constant error codes and crashing and frame lag that I had at the start of the game. And I'm on a PlayStation 5, by the way. I'm not on PC. So, a PC with like a 3090 and an i7 core processor or whatever is going to be perfectly capable of running it. I'm not too informed on the i7. It's probably like an i9. Anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. It's playable. Like, the game is playable right now, and I'm not excusing the bugs. It should not have a buggy launch. It should be a clean launch. I'm not saying that, well, it's Battlefield. It's that way. I just think it's unfair to nail down this game for its bugs, and then to also compare this game to Battlefield 4 and put this game to shame. The other thing that should be noted for the people that are comparing Battlefield 4 to Battlefield 2042, and not just Battlefield 4, any of the other Battlefields, look at how long it took for some things to get fixed in Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, Battlefield 1, Battlefield 5, Battlefield Hardline, which I don't like Hardline, or really Battlefield 5 that much. It's meh. It took, for some things, it took a very long time for some bugs to get fixed. DICE has already laid out a patch notes for tomorrow, and in December, early December, there's going to be another patch. And allegedly, there's going to be a third patch following sometime in December or like January. And that's insane, because that's within 3 months of the game's lifespan, and it's already going to have some severe quality improvements. I mean, allegedly, the third patch is going to have a bunch of UI changes and whatnot. Now, obviously, I don't know how true this is, but it's already off to a better start than Battlefield 4 and Battlefield 3 was. The point is to keep an open mind, okay? So don't simp for the game, right? Don't overly avoid the bugs in open criticism. It is correct to criticize the game, just don't over-criticize it either. I think that there's a lot of pros to Battlefield. I think there's a lot of cons to Battlefield. But I personally think, this is my personal opinion, I personally believe that Battlefield 2042's cons are not outweighing the pros of the video game. I personally find the game far more enjoyable. I find it far more like a Battlefield 4 and Battlefield 3 experience than Battlefield 1 or Battlefield 5, in my opinion. And I think that this game has a lot to offer. I think the main point that we need to focus on as a community is that Battlefield 2042 has a ton of potential. This game could be, I'm not saying it is, but it could be better than Battlefield 3 or Battlefield 4, depending how DICE handles things. If DICE is going to release a solid game that is bug-free or relatively bug-free in a state within 2 to 3 months of the game, and they're able to produce solid content continuously to a genuine amount, like an actual decent amount of content, we might be looking at a really, really good Battlefield. Possibly one of the best Battlefields ever, if they do it right. I think the potential is something that people are smothering. I feel like people are over-criticizing this game, and maybe it's just that I personally am bored of video games. I don't know. I don't think that is the case, but personally, right now, if I compare Battlefield to most other games right now, I'm finding myself undoubtedly playing more Battlefield than anything. With Apex and the Rampage issue, I've been playing Apex Lex, and I have like 2,600 hours in Apex, guys. I got a lot of hours in that game. And then I play a little bit of Genshin still, but I'm looking for a first-person shooter, and Battlefield still has that. Now, I'm going to go ahead and keep talking about cons just a little bit, because it's better to get the negatives out of the way. And this is kind of a ranting. I'm not going to cover everything. We already know, like, the PP-29 Bison is broken. We know the SVK is broken. We know the hovercraft is broken. We know the Nightbird is a little OP. And those things are all confirmed getting balanced, by the way. The Bison is getting nerfed. The SVK is getting nerfed. The hovercrafts, machine guns are going to be less effective. The driver is going to be easier to shoot out. The tracks are going to be slower. And the vehicle is going to have less health. The Bolt, I think the 30mm is getting nerfed. I'm not quite sure. The Nightbird, the 30mm chain gun or whatever the hell it is, it stuns more than it's supposed to. And there's some other bugs and whatnot that they're going to be fixing in terms of optimization and whatnot and server improvements. And there's going to be quality of life changes to follow, too. Like, there's probably going to be HUD opacity at some point, or team chat, or toggling the TeamSpeak on the top left corner. You know what I mean? Those are all potential to come. It's just a matter of keeping an open mind and pressuring DICE to the point to where they want to make that change, but don't over-criticize them to the point where it's just blatant hatred or just hating on the game to the point where, like, you're not giving it a chance. If that makes any sense. The other thing, really, not much to complain about. The maps, to some people, and this is a more opinionated thing. To some people, the maps are a much desired thing or a not to be desired thing, meaning either people like the maps or they don't. Personally, I like Hourglass, I like Manifest, and I like Kaleidoscope a lot. I'm not the biggest fan of Discarded. That's like the only map I sort of dislike, and that's just the way the community plays the map. I think with the way it's kind of, the ship is like the only viable area. There's just like clear spaces of like cover and verticality in random areas, and then where there isn't verticality all around, that is kind of just open. But that's just me, and personally, maybe I just don't know how to play the map. Renewal sometimes feels a little slow in some instances. But other than that, Renewal can be a pretty fun game if your whole team isn't fucking going to see the entire match and everyone, you know, is failing to capture any other flags. Breakaway can be very good. It just depends if your team is all fighting at A. Once again, that seems to be a common trend, but that's always been a Battlefield issue. It's not unique to Battlefield 2042. With Operation Metro, is just like Operation Metro happens on flags all the time on multiple maps. I mean, Caspian Border has its moments, and so does a lot of other things. Anyways, I'm going to stop getting sidetracked on that, and I want to move on to the pacing of the game. The pacing at the very start of the game is kind of slow. You know, if you don't get a vehicle, you kind of got to walk like 300 meters, and, well, you can't capture the flag because everyone else has already got it captured, and you got to move forward to a different one, and you're spending a lot of time running. I feel like that is something that they could potentially look into. I think that is something they're looking into. And I hope that is something to change. But other than that, the actual pacing of the match past the initial pacing is pretty good. The vehicles, it doesn't feel like there's too many vehicles at once trying to kill you, but it doesn't feel like vehicles are super weak either. It's the same with infantry. The pacing of an infantry isn't too slow, but it isn't too fast in terms of taking flags. So it's not like Call of Duty. You're not slide canceling and stimming and jumping around fucking corners at Mach 10. But you're also not like this super, super sluggish soldier like in Tarkov, which obviously Tarkov has its own game style and its own sense, and that's perfectly fine for Tarkov to be that way. But it's just not that way in Battlefield, which is a good thing. The matches can be pretty lengthy sometimes, and sometimes they're really short. Depends on your team. The SBMM is relatively non-existent in my opinion, and I like that. I don't like the super uptight matchmaking that forces you to sweat every game. Battlefield is kind of a sweaty game sometimes, but other times it can be casual. I think leaving the interpretation for it to be either, especially in 128 player servers, I think that's better. With SBMM that would be super uptight, I think 128 player servers would actually make matchmaking queues terrible. So I'm glad that SBMM is either, if it is apparent, it's very minuscule, and if it isn't, then I'm fine with that. You still have Battlefield moments in this game, like flanking a team in like absolute chaos, or the sandboxy moments like putting C4 on a quad, or taking a hovercraft and driving it up the side of a fucking building, or shooting a Nightbird or an attack helicopter with an RPG or a Recoil SM5. You still have those Battlefield moments. I mean, there's all kinds of crazy Battlefield shit you can do in this game. Sure, there's specialists now, which really don't impact the game that much. Their gadgets aren't super strong. They're not like Apex gadgets. I mean, yes, they make a difference. Like, Raoul can stop a tank from shooting him temporarily. Like, yes, that's powerful, but in terms of gameplay, you're not absolutely suffering if you pick one legend over another. It's just you have to learn how to use those gadgets to your advantage, and they don't play a particular advantage to, like, an extreme extent, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So, the gadget that you actually pick, like the rocket or the ammo or the actual med crate, like, actually makes a bigger impact than the specialist, with some exceptions, at least in my opinion. The gunplay feels really good, in my opinion. That's another thing I want to talk about. I like the punchiness of the AK, and I like the punchiness of the Magnum. The recoil doesn't feel just all over the place. Now, there is bloom, and they are adjusting the bloom, thankfully. But the actual recoil patterns themselves don't feel too overly done or too sporadic in most cases. A lot of people probably complain about the AK being uncontrollable, but as you can see, I have an okay time controlling it, and I have an okay time controlling the SCAR, too. And that's just not like, oh, I'm so good. It's just, I think it is possible, and I like the recoil of the AK. I like that feeling of the recoil, and I'm glad it's a challenging weapon to use. I do think that the M5A3 is really weak. I think it's a pea shooter, and it's not versatile, despite it being a versatile weapon. It feels like it's not viable at range, or mid-range, compared to an AK or a SCAR, just because its recoil is repugnant, and its damage doesn't suffice. So there's no reason really to use it. I also haven't used it a ton because I don't like it. So maybe I'm just wrong about that. But so far, I'm not a huge fan of the M5A3. I wouldn't complain if they gave it a little buff. The Kraber, or the NSW50, I think is a very interesting weapon. They might want to nerf its bullet piercing through armor vehicles just a little bit, because it's kind of annoying. Other than that, all the other weapons, with the exception of the Bison, feel really good. The K30, the Vector, it's got absolute punchiness to it. Its fire rate absolutely shreds up close, but, has no effectiveness at range. Everything has its own purpose, and every gun feels unique, and I like that. They kind of ascertain that a little bit in the beta. Now, it does, the gunplay does play a little differently in the beta, and I kind of miss a little bit of the beta feel. But other than that, the gunplay feels relatively good. Sniping feels really good. It doesn't feel too broken. I really like the zeroing change. So now you can't zero your scopes. Instead of being 7,000 meters out with your zeroing up and sniping people with a respawn beacon, or an ammo crate now, you can't do that. You're kind of forced to play a little more aggressive with a sniper, and I like that just because it's not so much like, phase quick scoping Call of Duty. It's more so that when a sniper is sitting so far back in the middle of nowhere, or in your spawn, or on a cliff, or in a hangar, where there's not an objective, or they don't have a good angle on an objective, they're not really offering much for the team. They're just, sure, they're getting kills, but they're not defending flags or giving intel, valuable intel. As opposed to snipers now are a little bit more forced. Now, they don't have to entirely PTFO, but they do have to remain a little closer to flags, requiring them to actually make their kit work. And that provides more intel for the team, but it also makes them actually more useful in terms of objective play. So I do like that. I think it's a really good change. The snipers don't feel too clunky either. They feel in the right place. I don't think I have any sniper clips in this video, but I do have some that I'm probably going to upload later. The last thing I want to talk about is Portal, Hazard Zone, and All Warfare. I want to do like a quick comparison to the three. And like I said, this is just a rant. I really have no idea where I'm going with this. I just keep talking about shit as it comes up to my mind. Unlike most of my videos of actual commentary and reviews, this isn't scripted. The specialists, I know a lot of people are complaining about them having specialists, and I think Russian Badger said this, is that a lot of people, what the argument is it's class identity versus personal freedom. So by allowing a sniper to run a rocket, or a recon to run a rocket, and have, I don't know, Webster McKay as a grapple, you can no longer be locked or siloed to a specific class, or a specific gadget, or a specific weapon, or a specific... You get the point. You're no longer siloed, and some people don't like that because it does produce more teamwork. It creates an identity. When you see a guy with a sniper, oh, that's a recon. When you see a guy with a rocket, oh, that's an engineer, or assault, depending on which battlefields you play. If you see a guy with an assault rifle / SMG, depending on which game you play, oh, that is a medic. And and there's a loss of identity when you can't do that. And I understand the complaints behind that, because there is less teamwork in some players because of that lack of identity or restriction. But at the same time, the class freedom also allows for a different balancing in the game, with Sundance's grenades and a rocket, or Sundance and ammo and a sniper. Like, there's a lot more in terms of playability and like play styles. There's a lot more play styles available to the game, and it just creates different metas. It keeps the game fresh. At least in my opinion, it does, and I like that. The other idea is that It's freedom. You're not frustratingly stuck with a class of bad weapons that are limited to a range, but you really like that gadget. You know what I mean? You're not forced to play that way. And I think it's a decent change. I know it loses identity, but at the same time, this is what brings me to Portal. That's what Portal is for. I mean, there's a reason why they're bringing back 1942 and Battlefield Bad Company 2 and Battlefield 3 and potentially Battlefield 4. They still have class identity. If you don't like Battlefield 2042's new mechanics, or if you don't like the Specialist, that's what Portal is for. And I'm not trying to be a dick, but assuming that Portal is done correctly, which, once again, hold dice critical, but don't be too critical, Portal is meant to take place for the old veteran Battlefield fans that strictly want an old and classic Battlefield experience. While Battlefield 2042 can provide some classic Battlefield experience, it's not terrible. You know what I mean? You have options. If you want a new DICE experience, play Battlefield's All Out Warfare. Now, there is still some classic stuff in the game, but if you want a classic experience, you just play Portal. You can play directly. You can play a medic, you can play engineering, you can play recon, you can play whatever the hell you want. And I like that. I think that there's options. And I really, really like that. I think that's a good change. It's a quality of life, in my opinion. Now, that's just an opinion. That doesn't mean I'm correct. It doesn't mean you're wrong. It doesn't mean any of us are wrong or any of us are right. It's just my opinion. I personally like that change. And as someone that has played Battlefield for many years now, I don't see the harm in it. The last thing I want to talk about is Hazard Zone, and I want to keep this brief because I haven't played Hazard Zone, but I've seen gameplay, and from my understanding, it is disappointing. Uh, it lacks, from my understanding, Hazard Zone lacks grind, it lacks incentive, and it lacks fear of losing your gear. It lacks the suspension that it needs. It needs to be more like Tarkov in terms of looting and suspension and whatnot, from my understanding. But I don't know. I'm going to put that off for now and maybe create a different video on it and maybe go in depth a little more in a different video. Until then, I hope I can catch you guys all in my next video. Peace out, guys.